program is the Active Center.
Hey everyone. Have you ever gone to pay for, say, a six-pack or a soda and just kind of stared at the total wondering how it got so high? Well, that extra cost isn't just random. Today, we're breaking down the hidden tax that's specifically designed to make you think twice about your choices. Yeah, it's a feeling we've all had, right? You're at the checkout and the price for that beer, those cigarettes, just makes you do a little double take. Well, that extra charge actually has a name, and it's part of a very deliberate government strategy. So let's get into what it is and exactly how it works. All right, so what is this thing? It's officially known as a sin tax, and really, the name says it all. It's a tool governments use to try and discourage what they consider, well, a vice. So technically, a sin tax is a type of excise tax. Now, the easiest way to think about that is like a super targeted sales tax. Instead of taxing everything you buy, the government picks and chooses specific products it considers harmful. Things like alcohol or tobacco, and then it slaps an extra cost right on top, which you pay at the register.
So why do governments even do this? Well, there are three main goals here. The most obvious one is just to make you buy less of the stuff. If a soda is more expensive, hey, maybe you'll just grab water instead. But it's also about raising money. That extra tax revenue can be used to fund things like schools or healthcare. And finally, the idea is to make these products sort of pay for their own cleanup. The money raised can help offset the cost to society, like the huge strain on the healthcare system that comes from smoking-related diseases.
So, what kind of stuff actually gets hit with a sin tax? Well, the list has been evolving for a while now, moving from the classic vices to some pretty surprising new targets.
The classic targets are exactly what you'd think: alcohol, tobacco, and gambling. The worries there are pretty well established: addiction, health risks, public safety. But check out that last one: sugary goods. Taxing soda to fight things like obesity and diabetes, that shows you how the whole definition of a taxable sin is expanding from just moral issues to much broader public health concerns.
The name itself tells you so much. Calling it a sin tax doesn't just frame these things as unhealthy, it frames them as morally questionable. It literally injects a layer of social judgment right into government policy.
So why are these taxes so popular with policymakers? Well, the people who support them frame it as a perfect win-win situation, a way to solve two big problems with just one policy.
Supporters say this is a really elegant solution. On the one hand, you discourage unhealthy behavior, and on the other, you raise a ton of money for public services. The thinking is, fewer smokers and less sugar consumption leads to a healthier population, which means lower healthcare costs for everyone in the long run. From this point of view, it's a perfect cycle.
But of course, there is a very strong counter-argument. Critics don't see this as a win-win at all. They see it as government overreach that creates a whole new set of problems, and it brings up some really serious questions about fairness and our personal freedom.
And this slide really lays out the central conflict. Supporters are focused on healthier communities and better funded public services, but opponents see a government that's intruding on personal choice, a tax that disproportionately hurts the poor, and a policy that can even fuel illegal black markets. It's a real tug-of-war.
This brings us to what might be the single biggest criticism of all, that sin taxes are regressive. What that means is, while everyone pays the same flat amount, let's say an extra $1 on a pack of cigarettes, that $1 represents a much, much bigger chunk of a low-income person's budget than it does for a wealthy person. So in reality, the financial burden falls heaviest on the poor.
So the case against sin taxes really boils down to four main points. First, as we just saw, they're regressive. Second, you've got the whole nanny state argument, the idea that it's just not the government's job to dictate our personal choices. Third, if taxes get too high, they can actually backfire and create a black market for smuggled goods. And finally, there's this fear of a slippery slope. I mean, if we tax soda today, what's stopping a tax on red meat or coffee tomorrow? Where does it stop? So, we've got really strong arguments on both sides. How are we supposed to make sense of it all? Well, it really just comes down to a fundamental question of balance.
There's no simple right or wrong answer here. Sin taxes exist in this constant state of tension. They force us to weigh these competing ideas, the goal of public health and state revenue versus the principles of personal freedom and social fairness. And finding a policy that somehow satisfies all of these things at once, that is the central challenge. And that leaves us with the one fundamental question at the very heart of this debate: where should we draw the line between protecting public health and respecting personal freedom? It's really a question about how much we want the government to protect us from ourselves
And it's definitely something to think about the next time you see that extra tax on your receipt and wonder if the price of vice is one we should all be paying.